Welcome to the Rimworld mod rundown. We'll be taking a quick look at what you can expect to see from Vanilla Ideology Expanded, Memes and Structures. For starters, you'll need to own the Ideology DLC, as well as the additional workshop content, Vanilla Expanded Framework, and Harmony. Time to cover, potentially, one of the most important mods on the workshop if you're using Ideology. Whilst the other DLCs aren't required to use this mod, we will be going over the details of it as if all official content is owned and enabled. So what does this mod do for me to give it such high praise? Well, bare bones Ideology is nice and all, but it's a little bit flat. There are a few memes included that let you shake up a colony in an impactful way, such as blindsight, nudism or cannibal, but for the most part of it, a lot of runs will end up playing basically the same, with a slightly different approach to how you would obtain your mood buffs. Memes and Structures adds, at time of recording anyway, 11 low impact, 15 medium impact and 7 high impact memes, greatly expanding upon the 26 offered with the base game experience. There are also 3 more memes included if you're using Vanilla Cooking Expanded, Vanilla Fishing Expanded, and Vanilla Books Expanded. As well as all of these memes, you're also getting the structures, presets, rituals, styles, and mod options to further tweak how Ideology works. So let's cover the options first and foremost, as this lets you really mix up the core gameplay. Normally, you'd be limited to using low or medium impact memes when you're first creating a fluid ideology. Now you have a checkbox so you can start with a high impact meme instead. I normally recommend all ideologies are fluid for this very purpose. The only upside that mod now has over using this setting is that you can start with multiple memes rather than just one, so you're up and running a little bit quicker in some cases. Then you've got settings for the maximum amount of memes allowed for your ideology, how many rituals you can add, the number of visual styles, relics, and ideological buildings. So you're able to weave extremely complicated and exact setups to create the perfect structure for your colony to live by. Things can get a little bit funky if you start stacking a lot of memes on top of each other, but for the most part there's restrictions in place to stop you using something like holy diseases and healthcare together, or nomad and city builders. But you can totally go the route of vegan cannibals, as harvesting the forbidden white meat doesn't actually hurt any animals.
I mean, I'm vegetarian, for instance. I'm not hardcore. And I eat a lot of meat. But
So then, let's cover the pages step by step as to what you'll be offered and cut to gameplay examples where appropriate. First is the choice of your ideology structure, and we have 13 new options here. For the most part, as is the case in Vanilla 2, structures are normally very limited in their impact, with it being used to determine your initial style rather than anything else, although there are the few odd exceptions here. For the ones that barely have any noticeable impact, you've got Eschatologism, Cult of Personality, Pantheism, Omnism, Agnosticism, and Secular Spirituality. All 6 of these have a style that only includes ritual ambient sound, so don't expect any unique appearances for standard buildables in your colony. The ritual music is nice though, as you can hear with Cult of Personality. So those are all minimal impact. Then you've got some that do slightly more without going overboard. These are Shintoist, Authoritarian, and Esotericism structures. Whilst they do include styles that include more than just the ritual ambience, they still only change visual appearances, whereas the remaining structures in this list are able to impact rituals or colony concepts. First of these more impactful structures is Circuitism, which is also going to require a choice of preset towards insect meat and force insect jelly to be loved. This style can be interpreted in one of 2 ways, as the gods are seen through boogie boys. Eating their flesh can either be considered divine or sacrilegious, with the style incorporated also covering so many buildings that it pushes the tooltip outside of the window boundaries. This style obviously plays very well with the new meme of Insectoid Supremacy. Next is Corporate Origins, which is getting weirdly closer to the reality that many of us are currently living in. This can add a clothing preference for a button-down shirt on top of its already extensive style change to the majority of standard buildings and equipment. It shares some similarities with the visual changes that authoritarian weapons can offer, while slightly mixing up the colour palette. So if you like wooden frames and Eastern Bloc aesthetics, go authoritarian. For sleek, commercialised guns, go Corpo. Of course, chances are it's the same company making both guns, so it profits either way. Hedonism doesn't have a great deal of style changes, but it does unlock a unique ritual, the orgy. So if you're running a nudist colony and want to give folk a way to blow off a little steam and sexual frustration, this might be the way to go. Just consider settling on a map with access to clean running water so that they're able to rinse up once finished. Otherwise your entire base is going to smell like a fish market in a matter of weeks. The last structure to mention is the Eldritch Cult. Not only does this unlock a style and ritual, it also gives you a new buildable obelisk and a need for something called corruption. This need is a balancing act. Provided that the colonist has at least some corruption, they become incredibly difficult to sway from their ideology. This works for both your own colonists and other factions that happen to generate with this structure, meaning it can be extremely difficult to convert a corrupted prisoner when you first capture them. If their corruption hits 0%, the impact from any source of ideological influence becomes massive, meaning a single conversion talk is likely going to flip their ideological belief instantly, as they're free from their brainwashing basically. However, if you push corruption too high and hit 100%, you're going to be risking violent mental breaks, leading into the nature of the balancing act, with rituals increasing corruption and time gradually eroding it, at about 6% a day. This passive decline can be stopped by building obelisks around the colony, as anyone within their zone of influence will be immune to this loss of corruption. Given that these statues come with a beauty debuff unless constructed entirely from jade, you do not want to flood the base with them, as everyone's going to be miserable from their oppressive surroundings. It's all about hitting that fine balance. Not too much influence to break people's sanity, but just enough to keep them from thinking lucidly.
Excuse me, are y'all with the cult?
We're not a cult. We're an organization that promotes love and...
Yeah, this is it.
This leads us into the meat and potatoes of this mod. All of the memes. Of course, these also tie in with some of the new presets, rituals, roles, and buildings, so we're going to cover those as they come up. Just remember that you don't actually need to take certain memes to apply presets. So if you want to make your own bonkers powerful ideology that uses all of the best buffs without actually taking any setbacks, you can totally do that. It's just a little bit more fiddly to put together. First up is Gestalt. This is a really low impact meme in the sense that it only impacts one thing, the preset around mood. However, that preset can be incredibly powerful once a colony starts to develop and grow, with all of your colonists leading towards granting an overall positive or negative offset to everyone else's mood. This makes successful events like an excellent ritual extremely beneficial. Equally, a colonist death can cause people to spiral, as the additional negative thought pushes people below the worst threshold and then causes more dangerous mental breaks. It's an extremely fun meme to try and run if you're pairing it with xenotypes that are frequently off their face on narcotics, as they share the high, as it were, across the entire colony. Then you've got Nationalist. This plays heavily into ignoring death debuffs and instead providing mood bonuses for executing guilty prisoners, or even your own sacrificial lamb. Depending on how you set the preset for execution will determine how you need to run your colony. Either you'll be wanting a captive or two at the end of every raid to make sure you have someone to make an example of, if you went required, or they'll just be a helpful mood buff in times of need, offering a bit of a lift with respected if guilty. What you'll want to consider is recruiting some of the subpar potentials that you would have normally left to bleed out or just borrow organs from, as the Commissar role comes with a unique ability to inspire loyalty by straight up murdering one of your own. This provides a huge bonus to mood for 30 days, so provided you can grab a straggler once every couple of quadrums, you'll always be in high spirits, and given that negatives around death are ignored, it's always a positive. The Egalitarian meme has a pretty awesome icon.
You son of a bitch!
This is one of the more tricky memes to actually work with. It removes proselytizing and conversion rituals from your colony, so whilst your ideology might be cool with others appreciating or exalting diversity of thought, the same might not always be said for those who you recruit, which can lead to a colony split over multiple beliefs with only your initial group appreciating it. You do also get a few other presets forced with this too, such as worthwhile charity, abhorrent slavery, and despicable apostasy. So even if you could change people over to your own ideology, colonists are going to respect them less for having done so. Emancipation is next, unlocking a unique ritual and style of interaction with slaves in the game. Slavery itself for your colony is forbidden, with the only way you can acquire slaves becoming via trade. However, having these slaves in your colony gives a significant mood debuff whilst they're still in chains. This is where the ritual for emancipation comes in. All slaves that take part in this ritual have a chance to properly join your colony depending on the quality of the outcome. Those who choose not to join, either by the RNG or simply a poor ritual, will thank you and leave the map. Even if you didn't have them join permanently, you do still gain a stacking mood buff for each slave that was purchased and freed in this way. Progressive is a really straightforward meme that's almost entirely positive for the majority of colonies. Whilst it does slow down progress at manual benches, anything powered by electricity will receive a significantly higher buff. So it's going to hinder things like art or stone cutting, but make for fantastic progress on machining benches, fabrication tables, smithing or electric tailoring benches. Just be aware that with some other modded content, like Helixian gas, they're considered a manual bench in regards to this offset, so it's going to experience a debuff, whereas things from the Mechanoids faction, like factory buildings, are considered their own style of automation, and see a 25% work speed buff rather than the 50% that your electric benches get. Now we've got Aristocratic. It's another tricky one to manage. There's definitely something to be said for managing and working with a couple of different ideologies across your colony at times, as those who follow this meme desire power and hate dumb labour, but not everyone in the colony can be quite so fortunate as to get out of backbreaking manual labour, otherwise nothing's going to get done. Anyone following this meme receives a -10 mood debuff for performing any dumb labour, and experience a +10 mood buff if given a role within that colony. So either you need a small group of nobles supported by an army of slave labour, or you're going to have some very pissy aristocrats on your hands.
I mean, if I was any kind of man, I'd have glassed her.
Oh, well, you should have done, darling. You should have cut her face.
I know, but I get so embarrassed.
Republic is a tidy, straightforward meme that plays best if you've upped the amount of roles that your ideology can support. This grants you 3 leader roles to assign, with the first, second and third triumvir. These work identically to a standard leader, so if you pair it with something like Collectivist that triples your work drive, you've got a handful of insanely powerful cooldowns almost constantly active within the colony. Obviously, this is going to be something that works best if you're on top of using your leader skills when they become available, rather than my usual playstyle of watching a colony die and then remembering all of the extra buttons I could have pressed to prevent it. Exalted Priesthood is another very simple meme that makes good use of cooldowns, by granting your leader access to the abilities of your moral guide, so now you have 2 colonists that can hit prisoners with Convert, or even better access to Preach Health for those occasions when a flu outbreak hits your most immunocompromised xenotypes. Just consider that it's probably best to disable kids in a game if you're going to run this meme. Elders is the meme that tries desperately hard to stop you throwing old colonists into either repeated age reversal cycles or the bin. It provides a large opinion boost to anyone over the age of 65 when set to respected, but jumps to a massive +100 if increased to holy, as well as disabling elders from performing any dumb labour. Colonists with opinion offsets this high can basically do no wrong, despite how controversial some of their views may be or how awkward they make Thanksgiving dinner conversations.
I made a lot of change and we made a lot of change. Cha-ching! And I grew a lot as a person. The sex has never been better.
Oh, that's very good.
Astrology is a weirdly normalised scam, designed to sell colourful rocks to girls in their early 20s, but in game it actually does something. If you've ever wanted to play in a colony that's happiness is largely dictated by RNG, this is going to be perfect for you. It grants you access to a new ritual for divining the stars, as well as applying an additional effect to aurora and eclipse events. These events either provide a positive or negative mood impact for a number of days, so you ideally want a small stockpile of mood enhancing stimulants on hand should the signs point towards upcoming turmoil. The God Emperor meme massively increases the mood of the leader in your colony by 30, which helps greatly with the increased expectations that come alongside the role. Not only that, opinions towards the leader will increase depending on the colonist's certainty in the ideology. So for those above 75%, they have a plus 100 opinion, which makes the leader basically infallible. If it's above 50%, they have a sizable plus 50 opinion buff. Between 25 and 50%, the buff becomes a negative, lowering opinion by 50, as they start to question if the God Emperor really is all-powerful. Below 25% certainty, the debuff is now minus 125, almost ensuring that at any given opportunity, a passing slight will lead to a social fight. So from low impact memes, now we go up to medium. This is understandably where stuff starts getting a little bit more involved. Holy Diseases is the first meme that sees a return of the 2020 Super Spreader events, this time in Rimworld form. Every one of your colonists reverts to using the toddler open mouth cough and sneeze wherever possible, making sure to get as much spray on any uncovered food, frequently touched surfaces, or open mouths and eyes. To assist with your colonists being gross little shits, pain becomes idealized, so there are no more mood debuffs for the muscle fatigue and stomach cramps that the flu brings. Not only that, immunity is enhanced for everyone, granting a massive 50% bonus to gain speed, making even a normally weak xenotype able to shrug off most illnesses. As illness is also exalted, anyone who's currently sick has a plus 20 mood buff. To ensure you have regular access to these buffs, you're also granted the Plague Festival. It's like a chickenpox party, but with more rat licking. It grants anyone who participates in it a dose of the good stuff. Just be sure to lower the priority of bed rest, so that your colony continues working whilst it's sick, and consider disabling medicine after using the ritual, just to prolong the recovery period as much as possible.
Stomach contents, 1 deviled egg.
Deviled egg?
The same deviled egg.
Trader is a really solid meme. It adds a lot of control as to when and how you want to get rid of your stored wealth. The first major point to mention with this meme is that it increases expectations across the entire colony. If you're unsure exactly on what these expectations are, it's a sliding scale of mood buffs and debuffs tied to things like colony wealth or noble titles. It's also used as a metric that increases the expected amount of recreation types. At the lowest possible wealth bracket, it's providing plus 30 to mood, with that buff disappearing entirely once you've accumulated more than 300,000 silver worth of buildings, resources, colonists, or gear. This heightened expectation means that you lose any benefit from this mood buff at 180,000 silver instead. As you'd expect for a trading focused meme, it's going to improve your trade prices in negotiations, and add a requirement for trades to be conducted in the colony at a fairly regular frequency, applying a buff if you've traded within the last 7 days, or a debuff if you've gone 7 days without trading. This can be either on or off your home tile, with caravans, visitors, or faction bases. As well as that, you're also getting a role to assign to a colonist for a merchant. This role grants a further 10% increase to trade prices on top of the ideology bonus, as well as a 5-day cooldown to simply summon a trade caravan on demand. It's extremely useful as an emergency backup button too. Alongside this role, you gain access to the Trading Fair ritual. Before you have access to microelectronics, it's free to perform without penalty, with positive rituals providing not only a mood buff but also calling in caravans to come and trade with you. Once you have microelectronics researched and trade beacons unlocked, there's an expectation to have at least 200 silver within range of a beacon to reach more traders for this fair invite. If you ignore the requirement, the outcome is always going to be cheap, which provides a mood penalty. Okay, so the trader meme was a lot. Let's talk about craft culture. This introduces a new concept for your leader role in that it's automatically assigned to the best crafter in your colony. There are a few memes that are going to make use of this automatic leader method, and it makes for very interesting pairings with things like God Emperor, as it becomes a battle amongst your colonists to gain that sweet mood and opinion buff. Craft culture is also going to improve the quality of everything you craft by 1 level, so if you're pairing this with human primacy and taking a production specialist, get ready to see a lot of masterwork and legendary quality pops around your colony. To offset this, all workbenches have a 25% speed penalty, and you get a choice between skilled labour being either slow or relaxed. Relaxed will lower 10 speed by 15% and construction and research by 25%. If you're crazy enough to set the severity to slow, it becomes a 50% penalty to all three of them instead. It means you're going to need to be really on the ball with fixing dangerous bleeds in the early game if you opt to use this. Your doctors are more interested in tying the sutures into aesthetically pleasing designs rather than actually saving a patient's life.
Help me.
Holy smokes! You need booze!
Bushido is a surprisingly severe meme to only be at medium impact, but it's extremely thematic. Taking some of the concepts from things like Raider or Supremacist and tying it in with a more honourable approach to combat. It has presets you'll be familiar with, such as ignoring pain, raiding being a requirement for the colony, and slavery either being accepted or honourable. It grants you the melee specialist role too, but not the shooting specialist like Raider or Supremacist would have. The biggest change with this meme comes with defeat being dishonourable. It imparts a mood debuff of -30 to any colonist that was downed in combat and lasts for 60 days. Given that pain is essentially ignored with this meme, death usually comes before dishonour, as most wounds to the head or torso are impactful enough to end their existence before they collapse from blood loss or lowered mobility. If they do happen to be down not only once, but twice in a 60-day period, there is a chance they'll be so shamed by it that it's going to trigger the need for the Bushido ritual of ceremonial suicide, a puzzle that uses a 9x9 grid divided into 3x3 cubes and requires you to correctly place numbers from 1 to 9 in them, avoiding any duplications vertically, horizontally, or within those 3x3 cubes. If you're the kind of player that values story above all else, rolling with colonist deaths rather than avoiding them like the plague, this is a really fun meme to mess around with. Light, unfortunately, is something I can't say the same thing about. It's really flat and it feels extremely vanilla. I understand the need for it as it counters the vanilla meme for darkness. It's just really dull and uninteractive. It provides a seriously detrimental combat offset if you're fighting in darkness, and given that fighting in the dark already lowers your combat values, it makes it essentially impossible to win a fight if you aren't illuminated. You'll also get a preference for using standard lighting and experience a slightly better mood buff when an aurora occurs. Eclipses, however, will seriously hinder the mood around the colony, not only from the eclipse itself, but also the likelihood that people are now working in total darkness if they're outdoors. I feel a bit bad saying that this meme feels vanilla actually, as vanilla is a solid flavour. This is closer to unseasoned, bog-standard porridge, without any toppings. The next meme is City Builders, and whilst I like this in theory, in practice it makes for very static gameplay. It applies the desire for a permanent base, and makes you suffer extreme debuffs for having the audacity to travel outside of your home tile. You'll gain a stacking mood buff for all individual rooms on your home tile, which at some point makes it near impossible for any colonist to experience a mental break, outside of losses during raids or deaths from accidents or old age, so there's no longer a real risk of mental breaks in your colony. You're also de-incentivized to leave the home tile thanks to the debuff from being away from your base, so quests, trade and opportunities become something you likely pass on the majority of the time. If you like the look of your home tile and never want to leave it, it's perfect. If you actually want to engage with a wider variety of mechanics, it's a little bit limiting, and it hamstrings your gameplay quite severely. Mechanoid Supremacy is next, and is surprisingly straightforward and very powerful. It forces mechanoids to be exalted, which imparts a -10 mood debuff for killing any mechanoid. So you aren't exactly going to want to face down the highest risk enemy in the base game if you're rolling with this. To save you from needing to kill them if they do decide to raid you, you're able to build mechanoid effigies, which cost 50 plasteel and 5 steel each. You need 2 of these per colonist to force raiding mechanoids to immediately retreat, which nullifies the risk of gaining that mood debuff. So it's not exactly a cheap defense to build by any means, and you do need to stay on top of acquiring plasteel if you want to expand your roster, as the last thing you want is to be caught short and forced into killing a dozen or so mechanoids. If there's no other option besides fighting though, you do have access to the Mech Hacker Specialist. these have access to a self-destruct command, which is on a 24-hour cooldown and causes a fairly large explosion around a mechanoid or turret within a short range. It's about 15-ish tiles. This self-destruct doesn't trigger the mood debuff for killing a mechanoid, so whilst you can't spam it, it does give you a way of dealing with the odd rogue mechanoid encounter.
I will have to kill you myself.
Take your best shot, Flatlander woman.
How did you know?
Insectoid Supremacy sees you worshipping the buggos, granting a similar mood debuff to killing mechanoids with their supremacy meme. You'll also be forced to love insect jelly and either pick between loving or hating insect meat. Given that you can't reliably butcher their corpses, it's probably going to be easier to despise it. Just like the mechanoid meme, you'll get a unique specialist for insects too, the Insect Herder. These have the ability to tame an insectoid on a 24-hour cooldown, allowing you to slowly amass your own bug army if you want a front line of clattering, skittering mega spiders. You're also able to build your own insectoid nests. These require a little bit of maintenance by the specialist to keep in good condition and passively produce 5 insect jelly every 12 hours for your colony. Just like a normal bug nest, this does need to be placed underneath an overhead mountain to work. Now, the cooldown on this ability is nuts. It takes 2 years as standard to recharge. You can get around this lengthy cooldown by performing the Insectoid Hymn ritual, which refreshes the cooldown providing that it goes well, meaning you're able to build one of these somewhat reliably every 20 days or so. If the ritual happens to go perfectly, hitting the entrancing outcome, any hostile insects present on your map just up and leave. It's useful if you've got a few infestations that you aren't capable of dealing with, as it would greatly upset your colony. Then we've got Party Life. It's similar in essence to High Life without such a harsh reliance on hard chemicals. Instead, it opts for fizzy lifting drinks. It creates a scaling debuff for alcohol, with its severity determined by picking either desired or demanded. One of the nice presets included is that recreation is loved. It halves the speed of recreation gain from all sources, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Colonists will be able to socialise together more frequently and be more likely to engage in social games rather than solitary relaxation, especially if you're playing with modded recreation sources like the Thermobass that have unique interactions with multiple users. The meme also comes with the Party Host Specialist that has the ability to trigger a party whenever you'd like, so you're no longer reliant on your colonists deciding to host one via RNG. The specialists themselves will need more recreation than other colonists, so you probably don't want to put this on someone that's expected to do a lot of work. It's better suited to a socialite or a general labourer. Best of all is that any parties you hold with this meme active are far more impactful for mood bonuses, so your colonists can stay up drinking and playing cards late into the night and keep themselves in high spirits. The Anonymity meme is so early 2000s that it kinda hurts my soul. Memories of fedora wearing neckbeards, clad in leather trench coats and dollar store chains, wielding Walmart katanas thinking they're a badass hidden behind this mask, is forever seared into my brain. Fortunately, the meme itself is nowhere near as cringy, although it certainly does make for unique colonies. Anonymity as a concept is required, which means social interactions are almost non-existent in your colony and there's a near necessity to keep faces covered at all times with masks or helmets. Because social interactions are so frowned upon, opinion buffs and debuffs largely work around actions rather than words. Romances are basically a no-go, and recruiting and converting prisoners is a huge mood penalty for the warden conducting the talks. Talking is not blocked by this meme, it's just never engaged in voluntarily. It makes using slaves or running a large prison extremely detrimental to your colonist's mood, so consider taking this carefully, as it fits into a very exact colony style. Healthcare is next, and in most countries it only costs 2 points of impact. If you live in America, it's 10 times that. This meme is at the same time the most straightforward and frustrating if you don't properly check the roles. Charity becomes important as a forced preset, which is understandable given that you want to preserve life. 10 quality is improved by 20%, it's a nice flat bonus. You'll be required to build a hospital quite early to avoid a mood debuff with this meme active, with the buff from having a hospital scaling with the size and quality of the room. The issue that I have with this meme comes from the dual specialists that are included. One of them is great, and one of them is questionable and kind of awful. The medical specialist has a immunity buff ability, somewhat similar to Preach Health, as well as passive improvements to medical tend, operation speed, surgery success, and they provide a mood buff to anyone they tend. The major downside to this is that your medical specialist can do no harm, and becomes non-violent. Not always an issue if your best doctor was already incapable of it. The nurse, on the other hand, is completely dragged through the dirt for their special ability of medical emergency. Using this ability stops the rest, hunger and recreation needs dropping for 12 hours, and it's on a 3-day cooldown. Whilst that does sound great, the nurse has no passive benefits to their medical stats. They lose all work types besides social, medical and dumb labour. Plus, it's a required role once you reach certain wealth thresholds, similar to the colony-wide desire for a moral guide. So whilst your medical specialist can continue to work, say cooking, crafting or planting in their downtime, the nurse is sat on their arse in the rec room, drinking coffee and eating biscuits, waiting for people to get shot. Skip the nurse, keep the medical specialist.
Dr. House, I don't think we've met.
Dr. Jamie Conway, I've heard your name.
Most people have. It's also a noun.
Royal is a meme that seems like an insane oversight not to have been included in the original release of Ideology, given that it came out after royalty. It has a surprising amount of impact too, so it's almost an auto-include if you're doing an honour-focused run. Royalty, as you would expect, is required to be either exalted or respected, with respected providing a flat opinion buff towards anyone with a title, and exalted working on an increasing scale based on how high somebody is within the imperial hierarchy. Like with craft culture, this includes a forced leader position that's granted to your colonist currently holding the highest royal title, which can be a little bit dangerous as expectations from both royal titles and leadership positions is going to rapidly jump ahead of the colony as a whole. Those with royal perks will enjoy halved permit costs and lowered cooldowns too, so you can really make the most of fire team support, extra labourers or resource drops. Not only do you get all of that, but royal titles also become something that can be inherited, making for amazing generational runs. Parents that hold a higher title than their children will pass it down to the firstborn upon death, so any progress you make climbing the noble's social ladder is never lost. And as if all of that wasn't enough, you unlock a unique specialist role of the Major Domo. This is a specialist that can never become a royal themselves, but they are exceptionally gifted in their work speed and ethic, with a 30% bonus to it, a lowered need for sleep, recreation gain through performing work, and a unique ability called Work Command that boosts nearby colonists' global work speed for 24 hours, at the small cost of depleting the recreation of anyone within that area far more quickly. This role is ideal for someone who has a little bit of passion in everything without really excelling in any one thing, as they can join in with your other specialists and provide a sizable speed buff to your more gifted workers. On the topic of workers inspiring one another, now we've got Industrialism. This meme leans extremely heavily on manual labour. Your mining yield, woodcutting yield and farming yield are all increased by 10%, and dumb labour provides +5 mood when performed. It leads to a very clean, organised colony that never struggles for basic resources. However, because of these low-end improvements, skilled labour either needs to be relaxed or slow, similar to how craft culture worked. This can stack with craft culture, so given that you're going to need to take a penalty to skilled labour from either of them, they do work well when paired together. The other forced preset with Industrialism is that apostasy must be accepted. It triples global loss certainty, which is how quickly people can be swayed away from their own ideological beliefs. Whilst generally it's a very rare thing for your own colonist to defect to another ideology through idle passive conversation, this can lead to weak-willed prisoners that have only recently started accepting your ways becoming immediately converted by their bunkmate that mentions offhand they believe in something else. Of course, not all conversions in Rimworld are quite so simple. That's where you have the meme for violent conversion included too. This has a couple of familiar presets, like slavery being acceptable or honourable, and diversity of thought leading towards intense bigotry. The new parts that this meme brings in are forceful proselytizing and violent conversion rituals. The preset for forceful proselytizing increases the spread chance of your ideology by 800%. So those conversation notifications you see from time to time about colonists attempting to convert somebody else are far more impactful. You might actually stand a chance of passively converting visitors, as your colony is so heavy-handed in their conversation topics. The violent conversion ritual, on the other hand, is a very binary option for prisoners. They either immediately repent and convert, or you make them bite down on a metal bed frame in their cell and stamp on the back of their head until the screaming stops. If you've an abundance of prisoners and a lack of time, this can get through them very quickly. You just need to be okay with losing a prospect or two along the way. Psychic Focus is another one of those memes that's a little bit surprising it wasn't included as standard with Ideology as a royalty integration. It includes the automatic leader mechanic and grants the title to your most powerful Psycaster. You get to choose with this meme whether psychic sensitivity is either lowered or heightened. Generally, over time, psychic sensitivity being increased has become more of a good thing, whereas originally nullifying psychic effects was seen as the better option. A lot of it comes down to what you're using. If you've got something like Psycast Expanded, which features significantly more buff abilities, they greatly benefit from increased sensitivity. Finally, with this meme, you get presets for doubled Psy-Focus gain, making filling the bar a total breeze, and exquisite meditation that further increases the Psy-Focus gain from meditation. Basically, you can burn your entire bar of psychic juice and have it back in a couple of hours. Expensive Psycasts are no longer a risk with this meme. It's something you can throw out all the time.
You saved me!
This just leaves the high impact memes then. Whilst, as their name would suggest, these do provide a more meaningful twist on how your colony plays, it doesn't always mean it's coming in with vastly new mechanics. It could just be a difficult grouping of presets. Case in point for this is Vegan, which is something you could totally run without using the specific meme. You'd just be missing the associated mood buffs, debuffs and benefits with it. You get a plant specialist, like the one High Life uses, as your crops are going to be absolutely vital to survival. As you would expect, slaughtering animals must either be disapproved, horrible, or prohibited. Wearing leather is also going to be either disliked or abhorrent, so Devil Strand is going to be an absolute necessity for your layers, because ranching is also disliked, so wool is going to be tricky to come by. As you would expect, you get the largest debuff possible for eating animal meat, or consuming animal products like eggs, milk, and insect jelly. To compensate for this, your farming yield is always high, and you also get to float around on this cloud of moral superiority. Unfortunately, the other factions find you insufferable and don't invite you to social events because you're a pain in the arse to cater for. Scrapper is one of those memes you can use to completely break either the scarcity of certain materials or experience gain, if you're inclined to do so. Whilst the presets for tainted and tattered clothing don't really change a great deal, the high yield from deconstruction absolutely flips the script. This returns 100% of materials used to build something when it's either failed, deconstructed, or destroyed if it doesn't happen to have a deconstruct option. Whilst in the base game this isn't quite as impactful, with certain modded content you're going to be drowning in materials in a matter of weeks. Things like ancient vaults or the quest buildings from the generator, or prefabs that you've ordered. There are a lot of busted interactions with Scrapper. You can also go the route of using Quality Builder and setting a building to desire legendary quality, and your colonists will endlessly recycle the materials to rebuild it and breeze through skill ups. This just leaves the other preset that comes with Scrapper, either preferring junk or finding it beautiful. This allows you to move the ancient junk scattered around your map into your own base, with it working as beneficial decorations for scrappers. So your base is always going to look a little bit unique, at least. You're definitely going to earn yourself a nickname on your planet.
Frank, what the hell are you doing, man?
That's my character. I'm the trash man.
Fire worship is an accident waiting to happen. It's a hilarious accident, mind you, so it's worth it. Firefighting becomes abhorrent, meaning anyone extinguishing even a single tile of fire is going to suffer a massive mood penalty. To go alongside this, sources of fire are desired around the base, so think torchlights rather than lamps, plus any modded content you have that allows you to burn brightly. As well as all the checked fires burning around your base, colonists will also prefer killing enemies with fire and starting unchecked fires. That means flame bows, molotovs, plasma swords, incinerators, or the Hellcat rifle. So you end up with a lot of burning bodies on your map, and extinguishing fires lowers your mood. Uh-oh. Fortunately, you're also given the role of a firekeeper. Bear seek lest. This specialist is the only person in a fire worship colony that will not experience a mood penalty for putting out a fire, as they're deemed to know best when it comes to all things burny. To go along with their allowance to snuff flames, they can also spread them with the strength and flame cooldown. This sees a small fire become an explosive inferno. Just bear in mind that for this role, they're giving up basically all other work, making a fire worship colony truly one of the more difficult ones to manage. Fortunately, you get a couple of unique rituals to make up for the headache of running this. A bonfire burning that uses a massive structure and burns for an incredibly long time, keeping your colony nice and cheerful, as well as a wicker man burning, which lets you brutally execute a prisoner by placing them in a sacrificial pyre and setting the whole thing ablaze. You're going to need the mood buffs from the rituals though to keep spirits high, on the off chance a flash storm hits your colony, because the firekeeper will not be able to extinguish a real threat by themselves. Now you've got a really unique meme, Fleshcrafting. This is a more organic approach to body modification in Rimworld, with you being able to Frankenstein body parts together on your own colonists to fix any injuries, rather than relying on bionic replacements. The presets for this one are pretty significant. Heavy scarification is needed. Only biological body modifications are acceptable, and death and corpses can be ignored. The organ use post-mortem preset is what allows your Fleshcrafter specialist to turn corpses into exploded piles of viscera that yield Fleshcrafted parts. This ability has a 30% chance to get 2 parts and a 10% chance to get 3, but it always gets at least 1. These parts are entirely random and will spoil in 3 days if left outside of a freezer. As you would expect, the corpses for this ability do need to be fresh, with the parts harvested providing a standard 100% efficiency, so at best they'll undo a missing part or fix serious scarring, but they're never going to push you higher than a baseline percentage. In terms of body parts, you can get about everything you would expect. Arms, ears, eyes, fingers, feet, hands, hearts, jaws, kidneys, legs, livers, lungs, noses, spines, stomachs, toes and tongues. So the only scars you can't fix are located on the head, neck or torso. As you would expect, a meme like this pairs pretty well with Cannibal, although things like fleshy tentacles and extra appendages from Anomaly will still freak followers of this ideology out.
Perhaps you're wondering why you have 2 heads.
Now we have Nomad, which forces you into running a really unusual kind of colony. Whilst it doesn't apply a great deal of presets, the few that it does are highly impactful. Firstly, permanent bases are despised. This applies a scaling mood debuff after 15 days of living on the same tile, with it hitting a maximum peak of -50 after 60 days. This also applies a penalty to farming yield, with a massive buff to gathering instead, so you're expected to grab all of the berries and fruits on the map rather than trying to settle down and start a farm. Travelling across the world map imparts a huge mood buff the more recently it was performed, and not only that, you'll have a much easier time with rough living, as temperature tolerances are going to be more lenient and sleeping under the stars isn't such a bad thing. To top it all off, you'll find it significantly easier to tame and train animals, which makes for huge caravans each time you pack up and move to a new spot. It's just a very unique playstyle. You get to see loads of fresh maps, place down little wooden encampments, take only the essentials with you and just move on. You get all of the fun toys from raiding multiple ancient dangers, and have a lot of opportunities to break the caravan up to hit quest sites along the way, to grab more resources or a potential recruit. If you've never tried a nomadic run, give it a go. There is very little in the way of a set end goal to the run. It's just enjoyable to explore and not rely on an incredibly entrenched base for a game. Blood Court is a meme I absolutely adore. When I think of the kind of fun, engaging memes I actually want from Ideology, this is the first thing that comes to mind. It has some pretty simple presets, like not caring about death or corpses, finding apostasy abhorrent, and thinking that scars are marks of honour. The biggest impact with this meme comes from the leader role being automatically assigned to your best fighter, melee specifically. Should someone in the colony surpass your leader's melee skill, it demands the ritual included with the meme is performed, a leadership challenge. This is straight up a fight to the death. The victor becomes the new leader, provided they don't bleed out between winning the fight and being tended to. As you would expect with this requirement for the colony, you're gonna have to be okay with some of your favourite little jelly beans being murdered. It pairs beautifully with things like God Emperor, Bushido, or even Fleshcrafting, as the loser's body can be turned into parts that are then grafted onto the leader's body as a mark of victory. It also makes for incredibly tense showdowns when you know that you're going to be losing one of your best fighters regardless of the outcome.
The Horde will endure! The Horde is strong!
The Horde is nothing!
I fucking hate that girl, God.
And finally, to go from one of the most violent memes included to the least, Pacifist. Now, Pacifist doesn't mean that you can't fight at all. It'd be suicidal to live on the rim and not defend yourself. You simply don't seek out violence when it isn't called for. As such, slavery, execution, raiding, and violence are all considered abhorrent. You get massive mood penalties for raiding work sites, keeping slaves, killing a prisoner, or attacking a target that's non-aggressive to you. To make up for this, mental breaks can only be sad wonders. There is very little risk to low mood in your colony. People are just extremely susceptible to it. As well as the mental break benefit, you also get 10% improved global work speed from the raiding preset too, making for an extremely efficient colony. The hardest part with Pacifist is the forced undrafting of your colonists the instant an enemy radar starts to retreat. You will frequently find that your melee line is being dunked on by enemies that didn't get the memo they were supposed to be leaving, or even worse, they drop their shield belts and proceed to get absolutely annihilated by a high velocity round. It's a hard life to live when the entire world is a hostile nightmare. So what about those memes if you're using cooking, fishing, or books? Cultured comes in as a low impact meme with vanilla books expanded, adding some pretty straightforward presets. You'll be expected to build a sizable library in your colony to keep everyone happy by the time they hit moderate expectations, with it needing at least 100 tiles internally to hit the best buff possible. On top of needing a large library, there is also an expectation it contains some legendary works, with it capping at +5 mood for having 5 or more legendary books. As your colonists are obviously fans of reading, they take time to absorb and enjoy the text, slowing reading speed by 20%, but granting an additional 5 mood bonus for a day or so whenever a book has been read. Not only that, authors are highly respected within your colony, gaining a +20 bonus to opinion for writing a new book and granting another +10 mood buff to the author. Just remember that in Rimworld the sword is very much mightier than the pen. There isn't a linguistic flourish that will magically save you from being stabbed in the face with a monosword. Sweet Tooth is added if you're using Vanilla Cooking Expanded. It adds quite a few gameplay effects for a medium impact meme. Firstly, all of your colonists now have a need for desserts, which can be satisfied by either eating chocolate or cooking up some delicious desserts in the kitchen. To assist with the initially difficult demand, you're granted the ability to plant a cocoa bush. This performs far better than the cocoa tree. It has a faster growth cycle, higher fertility sensitivity, a lower light requirement, a lower skill required, and equal yield. Not only that, because it's a bush instead of a tree, they can be planted adjacent to each other, whereas the trees would need a far larger zone. Just remember that you do still need to research cocoa to grow these bushes though, they aren't unlocked by default. Eating desserts for Sweet Tooth colonists provides a greater mood benefit, and you're also granted the Patissiere specialist that allows you to turn any meal, or stack of meals, into a dessert of equal quality every 48 hours. So for the first few days, if you're struggling to keep people happy around the colony, take a simple rice meal, give it the old razzle-dazzle with your patissiere, and claim it's rice pudding, which means it's dessert instead. It's a good thing that colonists in Rimworld have a distinct lack of object permanence.
It looks like they're bringing it out now.
This means that the last modded meme to come in is fishing culture, from Fishing Expanded. I guess it goes without saying, but if you're going to run this meme, it's best to have a river or coast on your home tile, as it's really difficult to fish in a mountain base. This will grant you recreation gain from fishing, whilst also allowing you to gather a little extra food every evening during downtime, as colonists will go and fish to relax. As fish are going to be your meat of choice, ranching is discouraged, which lowers your tame and train chances for animals, as well as also lowering animal gather and butcher yields too. So you'll get a little bit screwed out of any heavy fur or thick leather whilst you're hunting to try and make sturdy under armour. You'll also likely find that your freezers will be overflowing with fish after only a week or so, because colonists following fishing culture have access to catch what are known as adept catches. These fish pack more nutritional value than a normal fish of equal size. For example, a salmon has 0.25 nutrition, whereas a short-fin mako shark has 0.4. You'd only need 5 sharks to make 4 simple meals, compared to the 8 salmon it would take. As well as being able to manually catch fish, you also unlock the building of fishing traps, taking a little bit of cloth and wood to build, either in small, medium or large sizes. These passively grab fish for you and break after 10 successful catches. You're going to need to stagger the spacing of these buildings for them to work correctly as well. You get the most bang for your buck by using large nets. Whilst they do take longer to catch something, they get significantly more nutrition per catch. And they last longer, in terms of the flat hours between needing repairs. That means you're not absolutely burning through cloth and wood to keep them maintained, giving your cotton plants a chance to actually grow. Finally, you unlock the ability to craft the tackle box with this meme, which can be built either from a crafting spot or a smithy. It takes 30 leather and 15 steel. This utility item increases the speed of fishing, regardless of its quality. It allows your colonists to complete 4 cycles of fishing in the same time someone without a tackle box would have done their 3rd. As I said earlier, you'll find yourself actually struggling for freezer space after only a week or so of using this meme.
6, 4, 5 pound, 1 pound each. 6, 4, 5 pound, 1 pound each. Very, very good and very, very cheap.
And that is Vanilla Ideology Expanded Memes and Structures. Alongside all of the presets that memes will have applied with this mod, you'll normally find counterparts are available to take voluntarily too, if you wanted to make an extremely specific ideology of your own. So things like lowered cost and cooldown for the permits that came with Royal can also have the opposite effects if you ever wanted to double the cost or increase the cooldowns for some reason. I mentioned some time ago in my rundown of the Ideology DLC that I find it one of the weaker DLC purchases without mods, and I got some pushback because there's a few people that consider Royalty trash tier, which is pretty clearly reinforced by the Royalty rundown being one of my more disliked videos. The people who aren't a fan of Royalty really don't like it. I honestly can't imagine playing Ideology without this mod though, or the next mod in the rundown series I'm about to cover, Alpha Memes. The two of them make Ideology for me, which does push it up my tier list of DLC, but that then muddies the water if a list of recommendations for DLC purchases comes with the caveat of, oh, but if you're going to buy it, you have to run this workshop content. Needless to say, if you're playing with Ideology enabled and by some miracle don't have this installed alongside it, you're missing out on a lot of fun content. If you would like to see the current suggestion list for mod rundowns, it's available to view on my Patreon page. All the posts there are totally free to read and it's pinned at the very top. You can support me in producing content like this from just £1 a month. It gets your name in the credits of these videos and helps me to stay alive. Thanks for watching folks. If you have any mods you would like to see a full breakdown for or suggestions of mods you would like to see covered, feel free to leave them in the comments, I might get around to them. I'll be back again soon with another Rimworld mod rundown. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon or evening. Take care.